Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to Strengths Conversations with Brent and Jeff. I'm Jeff Fennekamp. I'm a certified strengths coach, and I'm always with my buddy Brent. Say hi, Brent.
Hey.
Brent is also a certified strengths coach. And today we're talking about this talent of consistency, which to me, I'm excited to learn more about, and I'm so happy that we have someone with consistency here, Mariah, so you can tell us about it. This is one that I always get a little bit confused with, like deliberative, and so I'm excited to hear your perspective, Mariah. Affirming a little bit so that we can just talk about, kind of get everybody a base context of it. Someone with consistency, it's about balance, and needing people to be treated the same, or having this kind of real strong routine. So no matter where you are, your station in life, you have this need to have kind of a balance and a fairness. It's definitely about rules. My understanding is about rules needing to be clear and consistent. And when some people get an advantage or take advantage of a situation, that's really offensive to someone with consistency. They have a hard time because they believe, they get upset when people play games to get ahead, and they use some kind of trick or leverage that's not available to everyone else to get ahead. What does that sound like, Mariah? Anything like you?
That sounds pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, like with competitive people, I don't really like competitive people because they're just trying to like one up each other, and it doesn't make sense to me. But
okay, so you see that as like a competitiveness, like, if two people are like trying to win a volleyball match, or something like that, you find that as that goes against your consistency?
kind of, well, I don't know if that relates to consistency, but you kind of mentioned that, so.
Yeah, no. Go ahead, Brent.
I guess when I think of consistency, I think a lot of like people are really tuned in with consistency to like that fairness, but even just kind of like that equal justice. So like I think in terms of if a situation were to happen and someone was treated differently for some reason, I think that can kind of be a struggle. And I think they have a good barometer for like, here are clear-cut rules that we have. And one of the pieces of advice that I think is really helpful for folks with consistency is like better defining like what your non-negotiables are. So if you have a really clear sense of like, this is what's right, this is what's just, and how, especially with how you treat people and in relationships and things like that, better defining like what are like my core values, what are my non-negotiables, what are things that I need to stand up and say, hey, no, we actually need to follow this process or do things this way. And then recognizing that folks with other talents, in particular individualization, in life there's always some customization. So understanding that there are going to be points where exceptions are made, but I think it's important to recognize too, though, like, what are you going to stand for? What are your values? And in particular, partnering with someone with individualization can be a good barometer of, is this something that is a fairness issue, or is it something that can be an exception or not? And I think that's kind of a really effective partnership to kind of weigh those different options when decisions are made within an organization or anything that you're a part of.
Yeah, I would say you're absolutely right, Brent. I think that kind of steps into the coaching and developing this talent a little bit, is to, my understanding, and Mariah, I really want to hear from you, this concept of people needing to be treated consistently and fairly, and then how you react when you see people aren't being treated as such.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, no, so to me, what I hear about a lot and what people talk about when I talk about consistency with them is about this need for everybody to be treated fairly or to treat each other fairly. And when that doesn't happen, how do you react?
Part of me feels like I need a like situation, but I
Yeah,
do, yeah, I agree with that. I have been told in the past that like me, like a friend has told me that I'm like really consistent with how I treat them as a person, you know? So I guess I just like, yeah, I try to keep the playing field level and like not give people extra, I don't know what the word is, but yeah, like treating
yeah,
people the same like throughout, like
yeah,
day
right.
in and day out kind of thing.
I think that's important. And when we talk about things that aren't that when things come across as inconsistent, like what's a good example? Academically, here's an example. Um, like understanding how grading happens, like on those arbitrary grades, like the class participation grade, right? And that seems like there's so much room for interpretation and how your relationship is with the professor, so that you may be, the quiet person who sits in the corner who's just not into openly talking to a professor and not openly talking to the class, doesn't seem to get treated the same way as the person who is a little bit more like, yeah, I'll engage and I'm fun and we joke a lot and I have a good relationship with the professor. That inconsistency at the end of how those things are graded, or even how those people are treated, um, my understanding is that rubs people with consistency really the wrong way, and it's a real struggle for people when they see that inconsistency happening. So one piece of advice is when you're going into academics, or into classes, asking for clarification. What does class participation mean? If that's on your syllabus as part of the grading, I want to know what class participation means. Do I need to talk every day? Because if I do, I can put that on my did I make a comment today checklist. Um, Same with like the presentations, which might be graded a little bit unfairly because somebody has a great personality, and even though their content might not be as strong as somebody who has less dynamic, less woo, less personal relationship, that kind of thing, but their content is greater. Um, Understanding those and figuring out how to make that consistent would be really valuable for you to understand that. Does that make sense? Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, I would say like rubrics that teachers use, I value a lot because that like gives an equal like way to see what is expected through each student and it's like super clear.
Yeah. Mariah, what's your major?
Nursing.
Okay. So in nursing, there is definitely a need for consistency, correct? There is
Mhm.
definitely this
Scientific
policy and
method,
procedure,
yeah.
which I would find kind of relieving for you.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Like an interesting example is in student affairs, which is where Brent and I both live. Um, there isn't always a manual for what we do. There isn't oh, if a student comes to you with this, you need to act this way. You have to kind of feel your way through it, sometimes. Um, versus in nursing, it seems like somebody presents with this is the reaction first. This is the procedures you take. Um,
I think to think of too, especially going into nursing and other things like that. Um, Sometimes a barrier can be that you might be like focused on the rules or the procedure and not like you might give off the impression that you might not care as much about your patients or the relationships or different things like that. And just understanding that people come from different perspectives of like having really strong relationship building talents and things of that sort, and different patients that you're going to interact with are going to kind of want a different style or have just different perspectives that they're coming from. So I think in terms of like, yes, obviously when it comes to doing what you are doing with nursing, but I think understanding too that like in order to get someone to where they need to be, especially in the health field, it might take a different method sometimes in terms of how you're like coaching them through what they're needing to do, if that makes any sense at all. And I'm sure as you've shadowed other nurses and you've gone through your clinicals and everything, you've been able to see how different nurses interact with patients and can kind of glean different advice from how they interact with patients from them as well.
Yeah, I can definitely see like consistent people with just the methods and procedures of nursing, but then like people consistent with like the relationship that they keep with the person. So it can be like either very like not personal kind of person doing nursing and or like a personal person doing nursing. Is consistency like personal strength? Because I know 4 of mine are like relational, but I don't
Yes.
know. I have one more.
Consistency is firmly in the middle of executing. This
Okay,
is
so
how you get things done.
the rest of mine are all relational, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Which I think is awesome though, because you have a sense of like the relationships with that you're building. And I think even, I know my brother is a nurse, so I know like there is a lot of stress when it comes to just like taking on what's going on in the room sometimes, depending on the situations that you're having. So even for you, like being able to be a fully human, and when you leave work feeling okay, like maybe even having some sort of like, I want to treat the patients in the same way. I want to give them the same good service. And obviously you're going to develop relationships with certain patients more than others to some degree. But being able to like leave work without some of the stress and anxiety that's natural with some of the relationships that form, like I think there's a way to utilize both your relationship building skills that you naturally have and your consistency to both set boundaries but also build relationships, if that makes sense at all.
And it's so important to remember that these don't ever live in a silo. These are all connected to each other and connected to your personality. And even as you talked about consistency at the beginning, you talked about it as how you treat people. That was the first words, is I treat people with consistency. I treat them, even your friends talk about, you're so consistent with how you treat us and that kind of thing. It's such a great value. But that's also related to your relationship building. And that's why that's connected to that spot there. This is, as we get into academics and for people that will be watching this in the future, some ideas, and Mariah, for you as well, because you're not done with school, probably ever as a nurse, you will probably always be learning. A couple pieces of advice. Let others know how important routines are for you. So if you get into study groups or entities, organizations like that, sharing with them that I don't mind if we meet every Tuesday at 3 o'clock. Every Tuesday at 3 o'clock adds stability and structure to my week. So it's important to me to do that. And even to have a structure of what our studying habits are going to be like and what we're going to do on a weekly basis is important. Understanding what your study routine is, time, place, strategy of how you're going to accomplish certain tasks, right? So if you have a presentation coming up, knowing how you're going to prepare for a presentation might look different than how you're going to study for an exam or how you're going to come different for a paper. But being consistent, every time you do a presentation, this is how you do it. Every time you study for an exam, this is how you do it. Adds comfort. And to somebody with consistency, that predictability is so important. So it gives you some stability. And it also makes you an incredibly valuable study buddy. Like, because you lend something that almost everybody wishes that they had, which is this routine, this structure, this consistency. And so lending that talent to other people and sharing with them that gift is something that they will appreciate, or they should if they don't. You can articulate to them why it's so valuable to them, because it's something that you naturally want to do.
Yeah, I can add how like freshman year learning that like need to consistently like just sit my butt in a chair in the library help with like naturally getting work done, you know, or that comfort of knowing that like, okay, I'm in like a place that I can get work done and consistently do that. Um, yeah, or with like people studying with me and them knowing that like in a world that's always changing, like having this relationship that doesn't really change a whole lot gives comfort to other people, like in this like an academic setting too.
I would say in particular too, as you think about like projects, like when you're working with people, when you're working in teams, like a person with consistency is very aware of their structure and order, and that's great for you. I think when you're like working with others, focusing on more of the performance and the results, not necessarily how someone gets to whatever their results are, if that makes sense, because not everyone is going to be as consistent with you with how they do projects. They might do things differently. So as you're working together, or as you're like working alongside people, recognize that they might do things differently, but at the end of the day, when you're working with another nurse, if they, got the patient where they needed to be, or they did the procedure that they needed to do, just maybe, and maybe the procedure isn't a good example, but if they're doing things and getting the results that they need, like that's okay too.
Yeah, I think that's the tricky part, as I understand it from consistency, is understanding that there are multiple paths to success, and what works for you might not work for everybody. But sometimes the consistency, the strength of consistency, kind of gets in the way of seeing that. It becomes a block to wait, that's not how we're supposed to do it. That's and I think that's maybe the shadow side of it, is that there's this routine that you need to be able to see flexibility. So like Brent said, partnering with people with individualization or maximizers or adaptability or positivity, any of those that are kind of naturally in the, we can make it better, or this will work out fine, or this person needs to be treated differently because they're unique and they have a unique case. Any of those are really valuable people to run this. If you get that kind of knee-jerk reaction of, wait, we're not doing it all the same, run that past one of those, the individualization, the maximizers, the adaptability, positivity, to make sure that you're not overreacting to that case and you're allowing room for another viewpoint to be valuable.
And I think the best piece of advice that we always give to anyone with a strength is like communicating that. Just saying, I really value doing things consistently. So this is why I'm giving the critique, or this is why I'm giving that advice. Like, and being able to explain like why you are the way you are and why you believe what you believe. I think that can also alleviate some tension when you are going to work with different people in the work that you do. So being able to say like, I really value consistency, and this is why I think we should do it that way. That's different than, oh, hey, you're doing this wrong, you need to do it my way. Like it's just a more artful way of talking about how you have a need for consistency. And I think expressing that in a positive way and explaining it just can help in any situation. And that's the same for strategic thinkers like me, because I'm thinking all the time, and I have ideation. So I'm giving out ideas all the time, like it's candy. So I think being able to explain why you are the way you are and what talents you bring to the table, like that can be an asset.
100%, right. Last section that I like to talk about is careers, and as you're discerning careers, making sure when you're shadowing people or working with people that you ask a question about their routines. What is the daily routine of this job? What is, and Mariah, you're maybe lucky because you've kind of settled in on a vocation. But for those that haven't yet, if you have consistency, asking, I'm going to shadow this person today, ask them, what's your day-to-day look like? What's the routine of your week? Talk me through the rhythm is a good question to ask, because that'll be important for you to know as you're discerning that career. And then as you're trying out through college, you get to try out and audition all these jobs. Audition jobs that have routine, that you can predict a routine to. So an example might be, and Mariah, maybe this was you at the beginning, like intramural refereeing. There's routine to that. There's consistency that's important to that. And understanding, is that what the consistency that you're looking for? Is it, following rules? And I'm going to try and learn how to call the rules the same across the board. Or organizations to help create policies, like working in a residence hall as a VA, to go, what is the policy related to this? How do I enforce this policy? Those things might be helpful as you're trying to discern what about your consistency needs to shine in order for you to be happy, because it's not the same for everybody, and you need to figure out how do you honor this talent of consistency in a way that's something that you're going to want to do every day for the next bunch of years. And taking the opportunity in college to try out these jobs is important. And with that, I will say, Rosia, give me one takeaway from today that you heard.
Well, I heard a lot of takeaways, like Mariah had said. I'm also a nursing major, so like consistency with that, how she explained it will help too. Just like as me being a freshman, just getting myself to the library and like just sitting down and working on my homework, like staying consistent with that.
That's awesome. Good takeaway there. Mariah, give me one takeaway for you today.
Yeah, I noticed like how important it is to be open to flexibility and having people that think differently from you. And I mean, it's one of my best friends is like a wooer and like positivity, like my complete opposite, but it's like it's kind of like a perfect pair where we like really balance each other out. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then we have victoried today, Brent.
For sure.
Do you have any last thing to summarize it?
Yeah, I think just to kind of reiterate, with consistency, you very much care about rules and values and figuring out what those non-negotiables are for you. I think having that at your core in whatever role that you're in, whatever class that you're in, I think that's just really, really important to take note of. And for Mariah, as someone with consistency, taking that to heart in terms of like, as you go forward in your nursing career, as you go forward with your, remaining classes that you have here at Augie, I think figuring out what are those core things that I really want to value and be my non-negotiables, and then be able to explain, this is why, like, these are things I feel very strongly about, and these to me are non-negotiable because I think they need to be consistent. And I think that's important in how I treat people and how we treat people, whether that's, a nursing staff or whether that's, your relationships in life.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Brent. Thank you, Mariah. Thank you, Rocio, just for investing the time today on a Wednesday at 3:30 for coming and investing in yourself and investing in bettering Augustana. And just thank you for the time and energy that took. We're here every Wednesday at 3:30. We are here next Wednesday. As I'm looking it up real quick, I'll just tell you, next Wednesday, we're going to be talking analytical. So anybody with analytical strengths, we're going to be talking about that. You're welcome, as always, to join us. And thank you so much. We'll see you next time.